it was very interesting to see the problems people faced. People don't use things like unit pricing and so on. That's just too abstract, right? And so these are just examples of what we saw, and I'm going to try to summarize that in the way people think. And I'm going to use this term called concrete thinking, a very different way of thinking because people living in poverty also lack an education. The things I take for granted are not just material. They are in my ability to think as well, right? So here's a person, and this is an interview, and I never forget the people I've interviewed because they tell you their life stories, who says, well, I just buy the cheapest, basically. And so then I have to ask a more specific question, which is, well, you've got this bread, you got this bread. How do you know that you're getting more bread for the money, right? So it seems like a natural question to ask, right? And this person said, basically, I just look at the tag and see what's cheapest. I don't look by their sizes. They do not combine price and size. For you, it's like breathing. Price and size, yeah, that's a better deal. Not only that, I will take into account brand name and quality and this and that and abstract that into value and quality and all kinds of things, right? Brand image and brand reputation, those are all abstractions. We just do it like breathing. That's what I mean by concrete thinking. Let me give you another example. There was a Russian psychologist who in the 1920s studied peasants in Central Asia. So what he would do is he would show them a hammer, a saw, and a hatchet, and all of that, and ask them, what's the word for this? And just like you just said, travel and hotel, people can easily come up with a word like tools. But what would happen is that people would respond not in terms of the word tools. They'd say, you know what? If I have an axe, I can just chop down a tree and I can keep my family warm by burning the firewood. So what it means is when you're low literate and have low income, you think in the immediate visual graphic world of here and now and how can I use something rather than abstract in terms of what does it really mean, right? So that's what I mean by concrete thinking, right? It's all about practical usage situation. Tanzania is also like my own country, and that road, folks, it takes 2 hours to go from the tribal community to a Saturday marketplace, which is this. Saturday, mostly in the morning marketplace. 2 hours by car. People walk that road to this marketplace. And what do? I buy the biggest. I'm not going to go back for cooking oil. I'm not going to go back for soap and all that again and wait till next Saturday or milk or whatever. I buy the biggest. Wait a minute, why don't you buy 3 soap bars? They come, you get a better deal. No, I buy the biggest. Don't tell me to deal with more than one piece of information when I have so many constraints in my thinking, right? So that's another example as well. So here's an example. We look at these 3. You can easily make this trade-off. But people will tend to buy the cheapest, even if that's not the best deal, okay? I want to tell you about this because it's really fascinating. One of the privileges I've had in really kind of creating this area called Subsistence marketplaces is I also wanted to do it so it reaches people. I didn't want to do it just for the research, folks. And I've been very fortunate. I created a nonprofit around this idea of marketplace literacy that helps people be better customers and start enterprises. And that education has reached more than 100,000 women. And that's why I've worked in Tanzania, I've worked in India, I've worked in Honduras, in a lot of different places. And so when offering this education, let's say over 3 days, I would often go by Skype or in person and ask women, what did you learn? And women will say, I took this course and I took this program and now I'm going to take over buying from my husband. I'm going to go argue with the shopkeeper. He didn't give me a good deal. I'm going to switch shops. I'm going to check expiry and all of that, expiry date. So I would stop them and I'll say, wait a minute. Why didn't you do this 3 days ago? It was still your money. And a lot of women gave me a lot of answers. One woman gave me a great answer. She said, I never thought of myself as a customer. I just was somebody who buys and the shopkeeper was somebody who sells. We even take the words we use for granted. Customer. We know what it means. We know it's a very rich word. That brings up my awareness of my rights. It brings up online shopping and this and that. Even the words we use are much richer for us. For her, it didn't have much meaning. All she knew was exchange. I give money, he gives this. Customer, what's that? So that's the fundamental way in which we have unpacked poverty. It's not just that I take the material for granted, I take my ability to think for granted, and I'll talk about my ability to feel confident for granted and so on. And so this is who you're going to be understanding and designing for, folks. See, the challenge keeps getting worse, right? But you know what? You always come through. So even words, healthiness, like customer, healthiness, what does healthiness mean to you? I'm not in the hospital. As long as I can work and take care of my family, I'm healthy. So people will use an extreme instance to try to understand a notion like healthiness, okay? Similarly, nutrition. This is how my mother taught me how to cook nutritiously. I put this, I put that, that's nutrition. These are all abstractions, folks. It may make a lot of sense for you, but they're all abstractions. Interest rates are an abstraction across time. So, gosh, percentage, that's quite confusing. So you know how non-collateral loans are basically made? They're made in very concrete ways. So it would be something like, look, 1,000 shillings, that's it. That's one word, which means, over 100 days, you repay your loan 1,000 shillings a day. And to begin with, you'll only get 80,000 shillings. You can figure out the interest rate on that. Very concrete, not in terms of interest rate, which is an abstraction. 1,000 shillings, I understand, right? And you know how, by the way, going on a tangent, how these non-collateral loans are enforced? Public humiliation. Take away the only thing somebody has, which is their dignity. But again, remember, that lender is the only person giving a loan. It's complex, folks. Nobody else is giving a loan in that situation, right? So I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's right or anything. Business is an abstraction. Enterprise is an abstraction. Entrepreneurship is an abstraction, right? Ron actually took marketplace literacy. Our instructor took marketplace literacy to Illinois, and that's one of the things we dealt with, which is, what are you talking about entrepreneurship? Why should I come to this education? I have no idea what it means. I know I'm going to go work here or there, right? Cause and effect are also problematic. So just imagine telling somebody with low income and low literacy, you know what, you're a little overweight, your blood pressure is high, you have this genetic tendency, and therefore you could get diabetes. What's blood pressure? Well, there are these 2 readings. Wow, there are 2 readings, what does it mean? And then you're saying this, and this can lead to this. That's like cause and effect, different levels of abstraction and all that. And then, think about the pandemic, folks. People couldn't go to their place of worship. And they had to deal, and it was confusing, it was terrible for all of us. And for people who are poor, they provided the deliveries for us. They made us, they were essential for us, right? They provided the health care. They drove the trucks, right? And imagine the precautions, changing every day. So cause and effect is very complex. So what do people do? My arm was numb, now I'm okay. That's it, very flat, concrete. It could be very serious, but now I'm feeling okay now. It's gone, right? So digging deeper and understanding is very difficult. I want to say one other thing about cause and effect, folks. What did I say about myself? Privilege. My great-grandfather told my grandfather, you study hard and you will get the consequences, the payoff. And I am experiencing those consequences. So why can he make such a statement? I'm not saying they were rich or anything, by the way, right? In a village, lower middle, but again, privilege. Privilege is in here, okay? So why was my grandfather able to say that? Because they had the certainties in the village. They had the best water. They had the best this and that. Now think about somebody who is poor. Everything is random. Nobody is there to tell you that if you do this, this will happen, and you can't even believe it. Where is the issue of cause and effect? Even that, our rationality, our cause and effect, I would argue, are based on our certainties. And we must think beyond that. That's the challenge we are throwing at you, right? You are going to be understanding people very different from you, not only culturally, but socio-economically, okay? That's why we chose this challenge, and I'll be honest with you, that's why I love working on it after all these years, right? One other thing I wanted to ask you, when do you depend on pictures when you shop? When do you depend on pictures when you shop? Yes, please. Sorry? Online, right? I mean, it's very tough to figure out. What about you? Online, right? Clothing. Yeah. Particularly difficult, right? Because at least if you can try it out or something, it helps, right? And so, for all of us, depending on pictures is helpful, but we make a choice. If we want, we can read. If we want, we can go to the store. We exercise a choice. But I'm going to argue that the people I've worked with think in fundamentally different ways with pictures as well. And I'm going to call it pictographic thinking. This person, 1999 interview, will not forget him. He was 38 years old at that time. And he kept telling me, he told me he knew how to count, but he couldn't read. And the reason he knew how to count is because he had to count to survive. Okay? He had to count to survive. And so he kept telling me this, and he kept saying, I buy the same brand. So I politely, of course, asked him, how can you tell it's the same brand? Because he told me he can't read. And he gave me a great answer. Ain't nothing wrong with my eyes. For him, a brand name is an image. It's an object in a scene. It's a bunch of wiggly signs. And that's what he remembers. And there are people who can drive all the way from here to San Francisco without being able to read a sign. They're not exerting a choice. It's not like they can read and then they go and look at pictures once in a while like you and me. They don't have that choice. That is an example of pictographic thinking. By the way, I just wanted to mention to you, we did an interesting study, again, many years ago, where we showed people in adult education centers, either 0 to 4 reading and counting level, or say 9 to 12. We showed them words representing brands. And when you do that, the people with lower literacy had lower memory, whether it's recognition or recall or whatever, right? And then we showed them the same brand names with the signature, the brand signature, right? All the, like McDonald's or whatever, right? With all the familiar signs. And then the memory differences disappeared. And then we came up with this, one of these clever experiments that we professors do, right? We are full of those clever experiments, right? So we used brand signatures or logos, but they were artificial ones. So we made them up for McDonald's or Starbucks or whatever. And then the memory differences came about again. So it's the familiarity. People just look at it. What you see is what you get. They depend on their senses, right? That's pictographic information. You look at a bus number and then look at the shape of the bus or something, you get on the bus. And if you cannot read numerals, folks, you're really at the bottom in terms of literacy. So along comes bus number 17A. I think it's bus number 17. I go in the wrong direction or the wrong way, right? So this happens as well. We also found people who were ingenious in counting, adding, subtracting without knowing how to do it. So I want to tell you the story. A 93-year-old woman, I had the privilege of tutoring her in 1997. I actually started the work by just being a tutor. And just think about her motivation. She told me she had like first grade education. At 93, she goes to an adult education center, right? And so what she would do, she can't count. She doesn't know how to add or subtract. She knew that, well, there's something called taxes. Who's going to even figure out all that? So if she needed to buy 10 things, she'll keep 10 $5 bills in her mind. And as she went through the store, she'll take off a $5 bill. That's ingenious, folks. This is not about intelligence. This is about life circumstances. She was born there. I was born in the 2-bedroom apartment. I had all the advantages. Of course, we all work hard and all of that's fine, but look at the huge factor of where she was, but she was ingenious. In those circumstances, she figured out a way to go to, work around it, right? So that's pictographic thinking. I don't look at unit of measurement and all that. I just think about the fact that I have to bake a cake. I need sugar to bake the cake. I imagine baking the cake. I imagine how much sugar I put into the cake. And then I buy the packet size that matches, which means I can be deceived if it's only half full, right? So that's pictographic thinking, a very different way of thinking, which involves a lot of these different things. Sight reading is a word that was mentioned to me by one of the people whom we studied. Very different way of thinking. So I hope I've convinced you that you are going to be understanding people whose ways of thinking are fundamentally different. Even the words we use, we take for granted. Let me ask you my next question. When do you feel like you lack self-confidence when you shop? When do you feel like your self-esteem is affected when you shop? Yes, please. Yeah. And I don't know if they still pull all of those tricks, right? Oh, I'll go talk to the manager, just go in, stand somewhere and come back and all of that stuff. There's more information, but they always have a way of, making things complex. But I agree with you, car dealership, no matter what, okay? And in the end, they'll sell you something else, right? Warranty or something. Anyone else? Yes, please. Sorry? Why is that? Expensive shops with the pressures, right? The pressures, oh wow, I better know what I'm doing or appear like what I'm doing. Absolutely, right? What about self-esteem? Like you mentioned Hollywood, was self-esteem a factor there as well? Self-esteem is even more, right? I mean, it's one thing not to have confidence, but are there situations where you feel like, your self-esteem is affected? Let me go over there, please. Yes. Yes. I missed the last part. Online shopping? Yeah. We have a whole industry telling us how we should look, right? And absolutely, it has deep impact on self-esteem. You, please. You had it. Yeah, absolutely. Clothing, self-esteem. I mean, this is just a media barrage, on how we are supposed to look and so on. There was one other person I missed somewhere here. Okay. So, very good points. Self-confidence, self-esteem, etc. But let's see how this is for people with low literacy and low income. So, maintaining self-esteem is central in mundane shopping encounters. I go to the counter, I have enough money, it's cause for celebration. Gosh, I managed it. I figured out how to add and so on. I don't have enough money, it's cause for despair. Why? Because now I've been exposed for my low literacy. In my mind, my low literacy, which is a reason for my state in life and the fact that I have low income. Think about me, particularly during the pandemic. I go in, I don't want to use credit cards. I'm going to just take cash. I go in. I don't have enough money for a few things. Okay, put that aside. Who cares what the person at the counter thinks? It's all a transaction, right? Okay, I forgot. That's the end of it for me. I don't even think about it. But people with low income and low literacy, for them, this is a major issue. And sometimes people are worried, that let's say I ask a question. What if they ask me back a question? How can I answer it? There are people in developing contexts who are afraid, and in any context, who are afraid to go to a bank because it assumes a certain knowledge of English and forms and all of that, right? So those are the things that are going on, right? Just one quick anecdote. My wife works with people in trying to get them their IDs and so on. And I have to tell you, during the pandemic and since, you remember all these stimulus checks? Good luck. Of all the stimulus checks where we tried to find and connect it to the person who really needed it, probably 1 out of 10 people ever got anything, right? Because they're not able to fill out the forms, they may not have the IDs, a variety of different things, right? So so maintaining self-esteem is an important issue. As I said, celebration and despair, and the attribution is to low literacy. So people are willing to pay a premium if you treat them well. So in their decision-making equation, if you treat me well, then actually I'm willing to pay more for the same thing. They end up paying more, right? There was a time I used to interact with retail stores and tell them, look, you treat people well, they're going to be loyal to you. But retail stores are often a completely different direction. As you know, it's much more about self-service and things like that and so on, right? So again, the point I want to make is thinking, feeling, and coping. It's the way people think, it's the way people feel, and the way they act. All of those things are different. Coping, people come up with all kinds of rules. Like, for example, I'll buy one thing at a time. That way I'll have enough money and I won't be embarrassed. I'll only take $20 when I go shopping. That's the most I can get cheated out of. That's the perception. Half the time it may be true, right? I'm not going to go to drive-thrus. It gets very complicated. I'll go to a buffet. I'd rather go to a buffet. When I was growing up, my mother took me shopping. Now my daughter takes me shopping. There are people who will wait for a brother or sister to come in from a neighboring state to take them shopping, right? And as I said, in the US, a lot of our work was in Illinois. And then, of course, we worked around the world as well. So these are the things to keep in mind. And what does it mean for your project? Abstracting across time and space and all of those things are difficult for people. So one of the things to ask, even with words like healthiness, you want to ask them, what does healthiness mean to you? Right? So you want to ask questions like that. So abstracting is very difficult, right? So again, healthiness, nutrition, entrepreneurship, all these things are quite difficult. So in our interview guide, in week 7, you're going to be doing virtual interviews. In our interview guide, one of the things we suggest to you is, what does healthiness mean to you? Ask somebody that. What does education mean to you? Remember, I never thought of myself as a customer. You remember that quote? We take the words we use for granted. So that's one big thing I hope you take away from today. Make information concrete, pictographic, right? Self-esteem is very important. And I've told you, I've taken 500 students across the world. You folks are amazing. Your EQ is so far ahead. I've never had issues. You always treat people with respect, across the world. And, wherever we've gone, you're going to be doing virtual interviews in week 7. We'll have facilitators. You're going to be doing interviews in the US and Honduras and, and Uganda and Tanzania. We have field teams all there. There's really a global team and a local team here working for you, right? And, you'll see those interactions because we really want you to have the full experience we can give you. Talk to people, find out directly and so on. And we have a lot of recorded interviews and so on. Education is central. What do I mean by that? If you say you need iodine, if you have iodine in your diet, you need health care, right? Well, you're talking to people who not only don't have the iodine that you think is important to them, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the awareness. So who's going to educate them about your product? You have to. You're not a charitable organization, you're a business. But you have to provide them with the information that helps them understand the need as well. Because they're not only deprived on the iodine and the healthcare, they're also deprived on the knowledge about it, right? So you have to think about education, and this is all going to come up down the road, right? Short-term benefits are important. Don't misunderstand me. My point is not you just do something, just gratification, the short term. My point is, when I'm trying to survive, and you tell me 5 years from now I'll see a benefit, see if you can create a benefit in the shorter term. So I mentioned marketplace literacy, and one of the interesting things there is that right away people benefited as customers. They saved money, they didn't buy defective products, and then some of them became entrepreneurs. So we were lucky. So if you can have a short-term benefit also, that helps a lot for people who are living in the immediate. Let's talk about the project a little bit, and then we will get to work on what you need to do. So there are 4 parts. Right? I'm not going to repeat what your instructors have told you. The first part is understanding the need. The things in red, please focus on that, right? The problem or opportunity.